Hello and welcome to this two-part series on Minecraft integration with PowerPoint to create some really interesting interactive slide designs that we're going to use to create our own life cycle presentation for science. As you can see on the presentation here, I've got some gradient backgrounds which we're going to look at how to create. I've also got some shapes that have got cutout things in them, and we've got drop shadows. And we've also got our models here that we can spin around in 3D from Minecraft. Now the Minecraft stuff we're going to look at in part 2. However, for this first video, we're going to look at how to set up PowerPoint to create all of these different elements, the boxes, the circles, the titles, and the gradient background. So I'm going to click over here and we'll get started. So when you first open up PowerPoint and you go to a new blank presentation, you'll get a slide that looks like this. You may even get design ideas popping up. The thing that you want to do is get rid of the design ideas. We don't want those. You also want to make sure that you're in the PowerPoint program itself. So you actually need to start it from the start menu. And you also want to make sure that you've got the latest version, which is the Office 365 version. The Office 2019 version of PowerPoint works all right, but there'll be some changes in the interface. There'll be some changes in the naming of some things. And the Office 365 version is just a much better experience overall. So the first thing that you need to do when you make your new slide is go to the Home menu. And if you double click, if it's disappeared, you can click on it. And you can also come over here. And this will actually allow you to choose which sort of thing you want to show. So this is called the ribbon. And you can always show it. And it will just stick there for you. Otherwise, you can double click it. And double click it again to make it show up. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this up here and open. Now that I've done that and I'm in the Home menu or the Home ribbon, I need to go to Layout and I need to change this to blank. You always want to make sure that you're changing your first slide to blank so that you have full control over all of the elements on the page. I find that when I use the title or the subtitle, PowerPoint tries to do a lot of different things for me that I don't have control over, and I want control. I want to be able to make PowerPoint do what I want it to do. So go to Layout, go to blank, and now we have our blank presentation. The next thing I'm going to do is change the background color, and I do that by right-clicking on the screen and saying Format Background, and that will bring up my Format Background tab over here. The other way that I can do that is by going to Design, and then coming over to Format Background. So that will do the same thing. It'll open it up here. So easiest way, right click, Format Background, and it will pop up here. Here we've got different options for what we can have as a background. The two main ones that I use are Solid Fill and Gradient. With Solid Fill, I can simply click a color and put it in as my background. Now, the really important thing that you want to do with your backgrounds is create contrast from the rest of the information that you're going to have on your poster. So you either want to make it a really light color or a really dark color. You don't want something in between that's mid-tone, because then you might want lighter things on the background, you might have darker things on the background, and they won't stand out as much. So you want to make sure that you're choosing a light color. And I'm just going to go with green so that we can continue our theme with the life cycle of the frogs. And also what you can do is go to Gradient and you can choose different gradients. The thing that you want to really be careful of with gradients is that you don't create too much contrast again between the different colors. So down here we've got our ability to change our gradient steps. We could have this all the way out, we could have this all the way in. If I come and get a really dark color here and a really light color here, that's far too much change to bring into a background, and your elements going up and down the page will be fighting trying to get that right contrast and to stand out. So what you want to do is make sure that your elements are in some sort of close proximity in terms of the colors that you're using. So if I come back to my frog one here, we'll have a look at exactly what I used there. And I used, for the darkest color, a mid-tone green. And for the lightest color, I used the second square down. You could also use blue and blue here. But you want to create less contrast between the two. So that's really important. So I'm just going to go back to my green there and my green there. And then here, make sure that this is set down. Now I can drag these around. I just found that I really enjoyed having slightly darker green area at the bottom rather than having it a completely even gradient. Just bringing that up slightly gave it a little bit more interest. But like I said, you want to be very careful when you're using gradients. If you're not sure about your gradient, then I would stick with solid fill and just stay with light colors. The next part is going to be creating the shapes for our main box here. So that is in the insert, and we come over to shapes. We can also kind of get there from the home screen by coming over to this part. This gives us the same thing as well. So we can go to it either through home or through insert, shapes. Both will do the same thing. The thing that I'm looking for here is the rectangle rounded corners. So I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to drag that in. And I want to be thinking about sort of how big this is going to be across the page. I could have it this big. Maybe I could make it a little bit wider potentially. So that when I go to create all the other 4 boxes, it's going to fill the space up reasonably well. But I still also need to make sure that I've got enough space for my title or a title in there. So this may change size as I sort of drag it back and forth to find something that I'm after. The other thing that you can do once you've created your rounded rectangle by clicking and dragging in the window is that you can actually change the roundedness of the corners by coming up to this little orange dot here, and I can drag that in and out to create more of a pill shape, or I can have it more of a standard rectangle shape. So I'll put it somewhere around here, just so that it's not too round, not too sharp. It's somewhere in the middle. I think that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. So anytime you create a shape and you see this little round dot, the little orange one, what that signifies is something that you can grab and change the properties of whatever the shape is. So in this case, this is the rounded area around the rectangle. Now that I've done that, I'm going to mess around with my shape fill and my outline. So at the moment, I've got a blue outline going around this, and I've got a blue fill. When I click on the shape, if I click away from it so it's not selected, you'll see that everything sort of goes back to the Home tab. If I click on it, hopefully for you, it will go to the Shape Format tab. And if it has done that, then that's great. But otherwise, you click on the Shape Format tab. You can also go to the Home tab as well, because we've got Shape Fill over here and Shape Outline. If I go to Shape Format, that's here. So there's multiple ways to get to what we're going to be using. Now for the shape fill, I'm going to make it white. And for the outline, I'm actually going to select no outline. And that's going to be really nice, because then I don't have a blue or black or any outline around it. And I'm going to put in a drop shadow later on. So I'll show you how to do that in a bit. And now that I've done that, I might just tweak this ever so slightly. I think that's exactly back where it was. But anyway. Okay, so I've got that. What I need to do now is create this one back here. So this is another rounded rectangle, and this is going to sit behind. So we're going to have a look at how to move things back and forward in space in PowerPoint. So the thing to remember with PowerPoint is that everything's in its own layer. PowerPoint has layers of objects, and we can move those things back and forward in those layers. So it's like putting pieces of paper on top of each other and then shuffling the paper around. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go to Home, and I'll come up here to my rounded rectangle again, and I'll just create a reasonably sort of where I want to place it kind of title. I might move that up a bit. And you'll see that as I move things around, the guides, the dynamic guides will pop up, which are really handy. So that's showing me there that my thing that I've just created is exactly in the middle. And that's handy just for making things consistent. So I might just tweak that up slightly and bring it down. And then I'm going to tweak my thing there. Yeah, I might bring it over so slightly there. Okay, so the trouble with this is that it's sitting in front. And we've got two options here. We can either bring our white rounded rectangle forward, or we can take our blue rectangle back. So I'm going to select this, and once I select it in shape format or in home, shape format's a bit easier because it gives us more options. We've got this bring forward and send backwards. Now just by clicking the icon itself, that will send it backwards. If I click on the text with the little arrow, it'll actually allow me to send it all the way to the back immediately, or just send it backward as would happen if I just clicked the icon here. So I've sent it backwards. I could easily click on this one also and send that backwards or bring that forward. I'm going to make this one a dark green color though. So first of all, I need to go up to shape fill and I'm going to select my dark green. And then for the shape outline, I'm going to select none. And there's the beginnings of my title there. So I can bring that up and down, and depending on how high I want it, I can always drag it up a little bit more, but we'll leave it there for the time being. Now we come to the title for this particular little box. We've got our stage 1 and stage 2, so I guess this would be the subtitle. And the way that we create this is using a couple of different techniques. The thing that you need to do to start with is select your white rounded rectangle here, and you're just going to copy it. So you can either right click and say copy, or you can hold the control key on your keyboard and tap C. And then hold the control key on your keyboard and tap V. When you tap the V key after tapping C, you will actually paste it down. So control C is copy and control V is paste. The other thing that you can do is if you have it selected, you can hold the control key down and actually drag off like this, and it will create a copy as well. You can see the plus icon appear when you hold the control key down, so that's a very easy way to do it as well. I'm going to then change the color of this one to be the lighter green color that you see here. So I'll click on this, I'll go over to my shape fill, and I'll just change that to green. Then I'm going to take this back and place it directly over the top. So we've got our white underneath and we've got our green over the top here. And I'm actually going to create a new rectangle shape, and I'm going to just create it to hide the rest of the green areas so that we're looking at sort of only having this area here for our green. Now I'm probably going to have to change the colors on this one so that it matches this, because what we're about to do is actually cut both of them up. So I'm going to select my green rounded rectangle here, and if I click on Format Painter, what this will do is it will actually copy all of the formatting for my shape here and paste the formatting onto this shape. So if I've got a whole bunch of effects on something, I can simply click on it, click Format Painter, and then click the object I want to format in the same way, and it will take on all of the properties of the other shape. So now I've got two green shapes. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to hold the Shift key down, because the Shift key allows me to select multiple objects at once very specifically. So by holding the Shift key down, when I click on this object in the back there, that is going to allow me to select just this rectangle and just that object at the back. If I selected them in this normal way, what I'd also be doing is selecting the white object at the back, and I don't want to do that. So what you need to do is select the rectangle, hold the Shift key, select the rounded rectangle behind it, and then let go of the Shift key once you've clicked the rounded rectangle. What we're now going to do is actually cut out the shapes within these two shapes that we've got here. And we do that by coming over to Shape Format. We go over to this tool called Merge Shapes. Now this has a whole bunch of different things in it which are really cool. You can use this for some really fantastic different ways of controlling our shapes that we create. I'm going to choose Fragment, and what that will do is it will actually chop up this whole thing into different parts. And by doing that, I can actually take this part and delete it, take this part and delete it. So I've got my white here for the background. I've got my top subtitle here now, and I've got my title behind that. So this means that I can rearrange things. The only thing that I can't do, unfortunately, with this is to actually resize it. If I want to resize it, you'll see that these corner areas are going to change. So if I do want to resize something, I'm actually going to need to redo that whole process again. That doesn't take too long. So if you do need to make changes or you change your mind on something, that's an option as well. So there we go. So there's our little subtitle there. And now I'm going to go and create this rounded circle here, which isn't too difficult, but you need to know a couple of things to get that nice round circle. So I come over to my oval. Again, you could either click on it here in the home, or you can go to insert and click the shapes. But what I'm going to do is just go back to home and go to the oval tool over here. And I'm going to click and drag out. So now that I've clicked and dragged out, you can see I can create an oval of any kind of size, either high or wide. But in order to make sure that it's a circle, I have to hold down the Shift key. The Shift key will make it a perfect circle for me without needing to get it precise by eye. I simply hold down Shift and drag out. When I let go of my mouse button and then let go of Shift, it will create that perfect circle for me. If I let go of the Shift key before I let go of the mouse button, so if I let go of Shift and then let go of the mouse button, it won't actually create the circle, it'll go back to the oval. So you've got to make sure when you're creating your circles that you click and drag, hold down the Shift key, then let go of your mouse, then let go of the Shift key after you've let go of mouse, and then you will have your perfect circle. The other thing that we can do is if I go back to the oval tool again and click over here, is that at the moment it is creating the oval from this point and it's growing towards the mouse as I drag out in this direction. If I hold the Shift key, it does the circle. But if I hold down the Control key at the same time as the Shift key, it'll actually grow centrally from that point that I actually started clicking from. And this can be really handy when you want to grow something very precisely from a point. So let's see, I like it about that size, I think. And I'll just drag that over slightly. So now I've got my circle that's around about the size that I'm after, and I need to make sure that its coloring is the same as the rounded rectangles. So I'm going to come back over to my shape fill. I'm going to select white for the fill color, and I'm going to make the outline dark green to match this title here. And then I'm going to go down to my weight, and I'm going to make that really thick there. You can make it thicker or thinner by clicking on more lines, or you can make it thicker here. If I go more lines, it'll bring up the options over here, and I can actually set the width to be even greater or back down to 6. So 6 is a pretty nice sort of compromise in between. It's not too thick, it's not too thin. Maybe I'll bump it up to 7 just for fun. Live dangerously. Okay, so now it's at 7. Now that I have done that, I need to add in the title text. So to do this, you need to download the font that I've linked to in the description of this video, and it's called Chang'e 1. If I go back to home, I've got my text box here that I can click and drag out, or I can click on insert and click and drag out using this text box. So if I just click this one and I click and drag out, I can make this text box any size I like. But as soon as I start typing, it's actually going to, or actually if I don't type anything and I click away from it, you'll see that it disappears. So with the text boxes, when you click and drag out a text box, if you don't actually type anything in it and click away, it deletes itself. So I'm just going to click and drag out, and then I'm going to type in stage 1. Now you'll notice as soon as I click stage 1, it's actually gone and made it so that the entire box is only one line high, and PowerPoint will do that automatically. You have to click into the text box to edit it, because if I just do this, it will stay at only one line high, and I have to actually press enter to get it to grow vertically. Now that doesn't really matter because it's only one line high anyway. So I'm just going to drag this in, drag it over here. And this is where we need to change the color because the dark green on dark text looks very difficult to read. So I come over to my color or my font color options. And if I just click that, you'll see it turns red. So I need to click the arrow here and I'm going to change that to white. Now Calibri, I don't know how you pronounce it, is very boring. So we're going to change that to the Chang'e 1 font. So this is it here. And if I search for it in C, there it is there. And you'll have to download this and install it yourself from the link in the description. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. Now it's 28 should be about right. And I need to actually drag this out. So you see that it will actually cut that off. So I'm going to drag that out to make sure that it's in there. And I'm also going to make sure that when I put this in the middle, it's actually centered properly. And the way that I do that is clicking on the center as well as text align and middle. Now I think I want this back rounded rectangle to be a little bit taller to fit that in. So I'm just going to click that, and then what I've done is I've tapped down or up on my arrow keys on my keyboard, which allows finer control in very specific directions. So if I click and drag, yeah, that's actually pretty good. Except I notice with the text box, it actually puts more space at the top than it does at the bottom. So I am actually going to need to change that so that it's more central to that that dark green background. So I think that's about right. I might actually make it slightly lower by 1. Maybe that's too low. Who knows? Anyway, I'm going to go back and actually duplicate this. Now you can see that when I click on the text itself, when I put my mouse over the text itself, the mouse actually changes to the text mouse icon. I need to make sure that my mouse changes to the arrow with the 4 arrows or the directional arrows. So when I hold down the control key and then I get to that point where I'm able to duplicate it, you'll see that the mouse changes to something with a plus, and I can click and drag that now. And if I hold down Shift while I'm doing that, it'll put it directly underneath as well. So if I hold down Shift and move it horizontally, it will only move out this direction. If I hold down Shift and move it vertically, it'll only move underneath. So let's put it in the middle there. I'll move it up slightly with my arrow keys, and I'll take the size down slightly so that it's 24. So it's a bit more looking like a subtitle. And I'll just type in text here. So there we go. There's our subtitle for whatever we're going to call this particular stage. And we've now got a reasonably nice template for each of the boxes that we're going to create. The last thing that we're going to do is actually group all of these elements together so we can move them around as one template group. So to do that, I click away from the elements or the shapes themselves and drag over the top of them to select all. And to make sure that I've selected all, I've got to get a really nice big box around. If there's anything else out here that ends up being inside of that selection, that will also get selected. The other thing that I've got to watch out for is if I have my text boxes really long, like this, if I have it set to left justified, or left aligned I should say, if I select this, it won't actually select the text box because the text box, it goes all the way out here. And so what I need to do is actually select all the way out here to make sure that I've selected the text box. So that's something just to watch out for with your text boxes. So I'm going to grab my text box again and bring it back in. And then I'm going to change that to centered. And that should be cool. And then I can drag select that again. Now there's two options or two ways that you can group your elements. The first way is to right click and say group and then group. That will group. The other way is to hold down the control key and then tap the G key while you're holding down the control key. So tapping the G key while holding down the control key also groups them. And so once you've done that, you can simply bring your mouse over the top and move everything around at the same time. You can also go in individually once you've clicked the group and move elements around inside it, which is very handy. And then you can click away from it and then move it again. And that means that you can have a group of a whole bunch of different things and then tweak different little elements inside that group and then go and move it or change it however you want, and everything will go with it. So that is very handy, and that means that now we're able to put a drop shadow around this whole group that we've got here. And that is what we're going to do now. So in order to create a drop shadow, we can go to our shape format, and we can go to shape effects and shadow, and here's our outer drop shadows. We have inner drop shadows which don't work with the group. We also have perspective drop shadows, and the shadow options, if I click here, will bring up the shadow options which we can simply find underneath the effects icon. This means that we have real tight control over everything that's going on in our shadows. So the thing that I'm going to do is first select the center shadow as my starting point. And unfortunately, this is too dark, and also it's not blurry enough for my taste. So I'm going to make it a little bit blurrier, about that much, and I'm going to make it a little more transparent. I think I'm happy with that. So notice that I was clicking these values so that I was very precise with them. Drop shadows are one of those things that you can get wrong very easily. They should be used to very subtly suggest three-dimensional space. They shouldn't be used as very glaring kind of 3D, I guess, drop shadows. If I make it black, for instance, it looks very strange to have a black drop shadow like that with no transparency. So what I want is to have it like this. I could, however, potentially do a no blur drop shadow, and that will get me this. So if I make this a little bit bigger, you can see that I get this kind of effect, which is interesting. But also, if I offset it with the distance, that's also kind of interesting, but you have to know exactly what you're after before you start sort of throwing these kinds of effects on. So I could get away with something like that, perhaps, if I change the color. If I make that a dark green as well, that creates a rather interesting sort of 3D effect over the whole thing. I could also make this even darker green by going down to more colors and dragging down the value there a little bit more and put that there. So that gives it a little bit more of a three-dimensional effect. So that works quite well. However, what we're going to do for ours is simply make it a regular sort of drop shadow with around about sort of a 70 transparency and a 11% blur. Maybe I'll take that down a little bit. And I also need to take that back to a black, which I think it was. So just something very subtle that just slightly lifts it off of that green. We don't want anything too glary. So that is looking pretty good. I can tweak this further and try different settings for it. And it's really up to you what you want to, what sort of effect you're after with this. So it's just a matter of making sure that it isn't some really glaring, crazy drop shadow like that. So let's tweak that a little bit more. There we go. So we'll go with this. Now that we've got our entire shape done, we can now duplicate this out 3 more times to be able to get the same design for the other boxes that we want to get. So the way that we do that is we hold the control key and click and drag off, and that will actually give us the ghost of the one that we've selected. If I hold the shift key, I can make sure that that is aligned correctly, and I'll just click there like that, and then I can click and drag to select both, hold the control key again, have them ghosted there, and then hold the shift key to align them correctly, and then I can have those created there. So I need to let go of the mouse button before I let go of Control and Shift to make sure that happens. Otherwise, what will happen is if I just undo that, if I hold Control and then I let go of Control, it will actually bring the shape up to there because it thinks I'm moving it. So you've got to hold the Control button down and then move it and then let go of the mouse button and then let go of Control in order to duplicate the shape out. But this brings me to the next issue that you might have, which is that you want to actually change the properties on a particular area of one of these. And so what that might mean is that if you click on your circle here and you want to make that a little bit less weighty, say something like that, you'll then unfortunately need to delete all these and then drag those out. However, you might have placed them exactly where you want them. So here we've got these placed exactly where I want them, and I don't want to have to keep tweaking those back and forth to try and find that again. So what you can do once you've changed your element on here is that you can simply hold the Control key and drag it out and place it over the top of the previous one, and then you can right click and send to back, and that will actually send that newly created copy to the back. If you click this old one and then press delete, you'll have both the new ones there. I can then select both of those and then hold Control, Shift, and align those again, and then right click and send to back. Then I click, and if I hold Shift, click again, delete, I've then got my new circles there. So reasonably quick to go and change that. And so that's why you really want to make sure that you are happy with your design first before you get into all of the individualized text in each of the text boxes, so that each of those is exactly what you want before you actually get in. You might need to design the text in there and get some more text in there before you're going to be completely happy with it. So best to get one working really well and then duplicate it out with the rest before you really get into working with all of it. You might find that you have to go back and forward a little bit to be able to make sure that you get what you want, but that's design. All right, now we need to still create the color scheme for the butterfly life cycle from what we've got here. But this is reasonably straightforward using all of the techniques that we've already used with changing colors and duplicating out the different elements or the different groups that we've made. So I'm going to right click and say duplicate. Then I'm going to come over to my format background here, and I'm just going to move over to the yellow and choose the equivalent yellow color for the background. And here I'm going to actually change this up a little bit. What I did for this one was I didn't make this a yellow equivalent. I made this an orangey, reddy equivalent, just to make it a little bit more contrasting. So what I'll do is I'll just select that dark green, come over to color, and I'm just going to select the equivalent sort of orange rather than the yellow. So there's my equivalent orange there. Here's my equivalent orange here. And for the outline, I'll choose the same one. So I'm going to do that same process that I did before, where I actually click and drag out and duplicate. And if I send to back and click this one, delete that, select both of those, duplicate those down while holding Shift, and send those to back, and then select the green, select that one, and delete. I've now got my different color schemes really quickly from just those simple elements that we've been able to create. And I can go back and tweak all these. So I could also, if I really didn't like this now that I've done it, with the line change, is I can also go back and simply just change the weight of the individual ones. Outline, there we go. Because that could also be easier once I have so many that duplicating them out might be a bit arduous. So I can simply just change the weight on all of those. There we go. Finally, we're going to work on the titles. And working on text titles is one of my favorite things to do because I love putting the titles together in different ways and finding the different combinations and sizes that works best for the particular design that we're going for. So I'll show you my approach to doing titles, and it's completely up to you what you end up choosing to do with yours. But the way that I like to work is that I'm going to bring in each word one at a time, or type out each word one at a time. So this is going to be life cycle of a frog. So I'm going to type out life cycle, and then text box again of, and I want to keep this lowercase a frog. And then I can select all those, and I'm going to change those to Changa 1. One thing to remember when you're using text is to keep it to 1 or 2 fonts max. You don't want to use any more than 1 or 2. And you also want to make sure that those fonts actually relate visually to each other in some way so that they aren't fighting each other for attention. So I like to stick to only 1 or 2 fonts. I might have one font for the heading and subheading and another lighter font for the body text, but you don't want a whole range of different fonts because then the design doesn't look cohesive. So I'm going to take these and I'm just going to bring these up a bit. And once I've got them roughly sort of to a size that I'm happy with, I'll take the less important words in the collection and I'll drop those back down again. So I'm looking for the visual importance. I'm looking for which words are most important for the title, and I'm giving those visual importance with the size by making those bigger, or I could make the frog bigger because that's the one that we're actually focusing on for the life cycle. So if I grab these two and move them out, this is where we sort of play Tetris a bit with our fonts. We look at how they sort of connect together. So I could do something like this, or I could do something that I had before like that, where the F and the Y kind of come together. Also, I might bring that over so that the edge of that Y is in line with the edge of the R. And I'm looking for the space between the words as well. So down here I can see that the space between the F and the R doesn't quite match the C and the F. So I might actually tweak those slightly and bring them down diagonally so that they're more consistent with each other. And potentially I could bring this over here. It's really up to you how you want to snap these together. And it really is about the space that you have for your title and how your title fits into that space that determines how you decide to actually place your text down. So for me, I've gone with this sort of look for this particular version. I could have gone with my previous version like this, but I decided to do something a little bit different and make it slightly longer. And I can always select that, Control G, bring it over here. And maybe I like it just sort of hanging over the top of that stage 1. Or I could bring this stage 1 to the front and have it like that. And perhaps having this sitting behind it like that doesn't look so great, so I can bring that up a little bit more and have it more aligned like that. But then I would need to change these down here so that it was maybe diagonal. Maybe I'll bring that F down there and this A so that it realigns itself there. And I could do something, say, like that. And maybe I want to change the of now. Make that a little bit something like that perhaps. But I'm not a huge fan of how that's looking. So perhaps what I need to do is bring this over all together. And I'm going to bring this back down again and have that kind of sit snugly there. And then I'll bring this A back down again. And bring this over. So there's no right or wrong. It's just about placing the text down and getting it working nicely to feel as though it's connected in a way that feels believable. You don't have your frog all the way out here unnecessarily, or you don't have the A, for instance, sitting up here or down here. It all feels connected and cohesive. So that's feeling pretty good. I'm happy with that. Maybe I could take all these and bring these down. Like that. And then bring this up here. And have that sitting there. And that's a reasonably quick fix. Just as long as I've got those aligned. There we go. So it can be done in multiple different ways. Maybe I could bring it around here. Let's bring it in there. And then maybe I have life cycle of a frog sitting there like that. So it actually sort of goes around like that. And then I can have something else in here that I might like to put, like a full frog or something like that, or a photo of a frog. There's plenty of different things that I might like to do with this. And having these kinds of base templates that I've created on hand means that I can actually copy these at any point in the future and use them again and again and build up a library of them for myself to be able to quickly paste them into different projects as I go. So that's how you build up your templates. In the next part, what we will do is I'll show you how to export out Minecraft models and bring them into PowerPoint. And looking at Minecraft and the structure block, we'll be learning about that side of bringing those 3D models in and animating them in the next video.